everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our 40 Top virtual interview series. We're going to be focusing on overcoming higher education barriers and really taking a deep dive into the FASFA and West Virginia Invest. And my name is Brittany Bruce, and I am Special Projects Coordinator with the Marshall University Research Corporation. But I also serve as Logistics Coordinator for the Alliance for the Economic Development of Southern West Virginia. And before we get started today with our interview, I just want to talk a little bit about the Alliance. So the Alliance is a higher education collaborative, and it is made up of 10 higher education institutions in Southern West Virginia. And so I'm going to go ahead and read those out to you all. We have Bluefield State College, Bridge Valley Community and Technical College, Concord University, Marshall University, Mount West Community and Technical College, New River Community and Technical College, Southern West Virginia Community and Technical College, West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine, West Virginia State University, and West Virginia University Institute of Technology. And so the Alliance has a 21 county footprint. So if you look at a map, it's really Clay, Webster County down. And we reach 30,000 students. And we're really projects-based, results-driven. One that we're dealing with today is our 40 Top virtual series. And we started this beginning of COVID to still stay connected during this time of virtual that we're living in. So during this time, we have reached over 1,300 West Virginians that came and participated in these different topic discussions. And we've had over 16 plus segments of these powerful programs. And we've had 44 experts join us. We have hosted both roundtables and interviews. And then with that, I'm going to go ahead and transition into our program today. And our moderator is Susie Mullins, and she is project coordinator for our West Virginia Collegiate Recovery Network, which is a project of the Alliance. So Susie, welcome, and I will toss it over to you.
Great, thank you, Brittany. So I'm Susie Mullins. I'm the program coordinator for the West Virginia Collegiate Recovery Network. And just a little bit about our project. We started with funding from the State Opioid Response Grant, and we work with 7 of the 10 schools that Brittany listed off that are part of the Alliance. We're also available to work with any school in West Virginia, and some of the things we provide are training. We serve as a training resource, technical assistance for schools that are exploring or want to think about or are ready to start a collegiate recovery program on their campus to really build the network. And our vision with our collegiate recovery network is to see every student who is in or seeking recovery to have a supportive community and an array of resources at any institution of higher education in West Virginia. So that's really our ultimate goal. And one of the things that we really are looking into are how to help people overcome barriers to higher education. So we started this series to explore various topics that individuals might see as barriers to higher education, and there are resources to help overcome that. So a lot of times people who are in recovery don't think that there's a possibility, going to school, getting a degree, or getting, some type of trade school or certificate is not something that enters their mind as being possible because it seems to clash with their idea of recovery. And that's, something that we really want to help people overcome and provide resources and tools for them to overcome that. So we started this series about overcoming barriers to higher education, and we're kicking it off with Brian Weingart and Sarah Musgrave, who are joining us. Brian is the Senior Director of Financial Aid with the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, and Sarah Musgrave is the Program Administrator at West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission. And they're going to talk with us and share resources for everybody today about the FAFSA and the West Virginia Invest program. So welcome, Brian and Sarah, to our 40 Top.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We'll just hit right into the presentation here. Again, I'll be going over just an overview of the financial aid process, talking about the FASFA and what that is, giving you some tools and resources that are available to help you through this process. And then I'll turn it over to Sarah, who will talk about the West Virginia Invest Grant and how that works and how that might benefit you with pursuing a post-secondary education. When we talk about financial aid, there's lots of different applications that are out there, but the main application is the FASFA. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It is a federal document through the U.S. Department of Education that you can fill out on an annual basis to apply for financial aid. And it covers not only just federal financial aid, but also state financial aid, and a lot of colleges require it for their own institutional financial aid programs. But the FASFA isn't the only application out there, and so be aware that there are other financial aid applications you might need to complete, like the West Virginia Invest Grant requires both the FASFA and the West Virginia Invest application. Colleges might have their own application process to apply for their institutional or college scholarships, and be aware of the private scholarships that are out there, that they have their own applications, their own deadlines, and so I encourage you to apply for as many as possible in order to, again, reduce the cost of post-secondary education. To fill out the FASFA, you can go to FASFA.gov in order to complete the FASFA. There's a paper process if you don't feel comfortable completing the FASFA online, but that is a very secure way of completing the FASFA online. It also makes the process a lot quicker and easier if you can go online and complete the FASFA. It becomes available each year on October 1st for the following academic year. And so for right now, the 2021-2022 FASFA became available this past October. And of course, every October, the new FASFA comes out. But again, if you're looking to go this summer or even this spring, that you can still file out the 2020-2021 FASFA as well. So the FASFA really in itself does not have a deadline. You can fill it out at any time throughout the course of the year. But the earlier you can fill it out, the better, because there are sometimes limited funds in certain programs. And so if you delay and wait, you might miss out on some free scholarships and grants. Just looking at here at the slide, the West Virginia Higher Education Grant or the West Virginia State Grant, it has a deadline April 15th each year. So you want to make sure you try to at least fill it out before April 15th of each year in order to be considered for the West Virginia Higher Education Grant, which is a grant through the state of West Virginia for West Virginia residents pursuing a post-secondary education. West Virginia Invest, again, it has its own application. We do have a priority deadline, but it's not a hard and fast deadline. So while we encourage you to fill out the Invest application prior to April 15th, if that's not possible, you can still fill it out afterwards and still be considered as long as funding is available. When we talk about the FASFA should not be a daunting process, even though a lot of times it appears so. It on average takes less than 30 minutes to complete if you have all your information. There's 5 sections that you would normally fill out. So section 1 is the student's information. So it's just going to be, as you're filling it out, you're going to be putting in your name, your address, telephone number, social security number, and that basic demographic information that a lot of forms require. Section 2 is the dependency status questions, and these are the questions that determine whether you have to put parents' information on the FAFSA or not. And so in some cases you may be required to, in some cases you may not. Obviously it's not a choice, it's based totally on these questions in Section 2. Are you 24 years old? Are you married? Do you have children you provide more than half the support to? Are you a graduate? Are you active duty military or a veteran of the military? And it just goes through a list of questions that determine whether you need to put parents' information on the FAFSA or not. If you answer no to all the questions in Section 2, then you then go to Section 3, where they'll require that you put your biological or adoptive parents' information on the FAFSA. But if you answer yes to any one of the questions in Section 2, then you would skip Section 3, would not have to put any parent information on the FAFSA. And so if you have questions on that, obviously you can contact us and we can go through that information with you. Section 4 is the student's finances. And so both Section 3 and Section 4, they're looking at a specific year in terms of the income that you earned. And so for 2021, 2022, they're actually looking at your 2019 income or your 2019 parents' income. And so those are the taxes that you just filed, where the extended deadline was July 15th of this year. But again, it was last year's taxes. that you'd be putting on the FAFSA. Section 5 is a list of schools. You can list up to 10 schools on the FAFSA. Each school has a unique 6-digit code, and as long as you put that 6-digit code on the FAFSA, then the school will automatically receive a copy of your FAFSA. If you don't list the school, then they would not receive a copy of it. In all cases, because we're the state agency for West Virginia, our office will always receive a copy of your FAFSA for all state financial aid purposes, like West Virginia Invest, West Virginia Higher Education Grant, and different things like that. So again, complete the FAFSA, get it turned in, and then schools as well as our office can determine what types of financial aid you're eligible for. So as you go to complete the FAFSA, there's some things that you do need to collect in order to complete it. Number one, you need to have your Social Security number. It's vital that you have that and you enter it in correctly. If you are not a U.S. citizen, but you are an eligible non-citizen, you would have an alien registration number, and so you would need that when completing the FAFSA if you're not a U.S. citizen. Your federal income tax returns, and so if you have your 2019 tax returns, your W-2s from 2019, any money that you earned. While you can transfer that information, there's a link within the FAFSA to transfer it. It's always good to have that information as well, just in case. They do ask for assets, and so your cash, savings, checking, any type of investments that you might have, you want to make sure you have what the current value is on the day you fill out the FAFSA. If you receive any untaxed income, the FAFSA will ask questions about untaxed income. And then lastly, an FSA ID. And this is going to be a username password that you will create in order to sign the FAFSA. You can do that right before you do the FAFSA. You can do it while you're doing the FAFSA. You can complete or create that username password at any point during the process. But once you get to the end of the FAFSA, you'll need it in order to sign it before you submit it. Just some frequent errors that we see and a lot of questions that we get. Obviously, one, Social Security number. If you enter it in incorrectly, it's going to reject out because they do a match with the Social Security Administration as well as Department of Homeland Security to do database matches to make sure you are who you say you are. So it's very important that you enter in that Social Security number correctly. It is a pain in the rear end to correct it if you enter it in incorrectly because that is the key to everything they do is that Social Security number. Also, untaxed income. And so when they ask you questions about untaxed income, you just want to watch those questions carefully because some untaxed income you do report and some you do not report. And so it's going to vary depending on what the type of income is. And just to give you a couple of examples. So if there's child support received, child support paid, if you contribute to a retirement account before taxes, if you have unemployment, those types of income gets reported on the FAFSA. Disability also gets reported on the FAFSA, but there's others that do not. And so if you collect Social Security and it's not taxed, you would not report that as untaxed income. Alimony does not get reported on here. And so you just watch carefully in terms of untaxed income because some gets reported and some does not get reported. U.S. income taxes paid, again, it's going to be a line actually on your tax return that you're going to be entering in. And a lot of times where we get into issues is people take into account what they paid in taxes on their W-2s and not take into consideration they might have to pay extra or they might get some of that back as a refund. It's going to be your bottom line income tax liability. So you do want to look on your tax return for that information. Household size. That they're going to be asking for how many people are in the household size, and it's not the same as exemptions that you would report on the tax return. When they ask you for household size, it's the number of people within the household during the academic year that you'll be going to school. And so if you're looking to go for 2021, 2022 to college, they'll be asking you the household size from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. So it's not looking backwards, it's looking forwards as to how many people will be in the household while you're going to college. And so just watch that question carefully. And then lastly, FAFSA year. That there are currently 2 years available that you can complete right now. There's the 2020-21 for those currently going to college this year. And then there's the 2021-22 FAFSA for those that will be starting college next fall. And so just make sure you are filling out the right year for when you plan to go to college. And so check with the colleges. The one caveat is summer. And so summer can be part of either year, the previous year or the upcoming year. And so if you're planning on going summer, check with the college to see which year FAFSA you'll need for financial aid for that summer term.
Brian, may I ask you a question on that last slide?
Sure.
So household size, and you said that's forecasting into the year that the individual is going to school. So if the person is going to school and living on campus and not living in the household, do they count themselves or do they not count themselves as part of the household?
So the student is always part of the household size. Okay, and so you would always want to include the student, and even if they're living on campus, if they're a dependent student, you would also include the parents in the household size, as well as anybody else the parents are providing more than half support to, would also be included in the household size. If the person within the household also is pregnant, you can include an unborn child in the household size. And so it's just, again, you want to watch that question.
Okay, so if they have multiple children attending college, all of those students, all of those children count as in the household size.
Yeah, anyone the parents are providing more than half of their financial support would be included in the household size, even if they aren't technically living in the house, but maybe they're at college and the parents are providing more than half the support, you would include them in the household size.
Okay, thank you.
As I mentioned a little earlier, there is a link to the IRS, and so if you do file a federal tax return in 2019, when you get to that part where you have to enter that information in, you can click on the link to the IRS, and then it will transfer the information from the IRS to your FASFA, and so you don't have to answer those questions. It's also masked and encrypted, so you would not be able to see those numbers. You would not be able to change those numbers, but then the college will know that it was transferred directly from the IRS and know that it's accurate and won't question anything that's populated from the IRS. If you are not required to file a tax return and you did not file a tax return, that's fine. There's actually a question that says, I did not file. You answer that, and then it skips all the IRS questions. And so that's not an issue either if you did not file a tax return. Unless in case you were required to file and you didn't file, then it becomes an issue. But as long as you had an income less than what was required to file, you're fine. And just say you were not required to file. And then I mentioned earlier the Fsa Id. Again, this is going to be your electronic signature. It's a username password that you will create in order to sign your FAFSA. You can link it to an email address and or a cell phone number. So if you can use your email address or cell phone then as your username, or you can use your email and cell phone to retrieve your username or reset your password if you forget it. But again, you just want to make sure when you create it, it does have to be different, unique. There's 20 million students that fill out the FAFSA every year, and so Smith is already taken. So you got to come up with a unique username that no one else in the country is currently using. But again, make sure you write it down, keep it in a secure location, because you will need this every time you try to access or complete the FAFSA. So once you complete the FAFSA, again, it should take you less than 30 minutes. If you're filling out as a renewal or as a second time, it usually takes less than 20 minutes because they will pre-populate a lot of the demographic information the next time you fill it out. Once you hit the submit button, it will be sent to the U.S. Department of Education for them to process. Usually within 72 hours, they'll process it, then send a copy of it to the colleges you list on the FAFSA as well as to our office. You would then get a follow-up email from the U.S. Department of Education to view your student aid report. These are the results of your FAFSA. So you want to look through it. It'll talk about if there's any issues with your FAFSA, if it rejected out because it was missing some information. It will tell you on that student aid report. It'll tell your eligibility for federal financial aid and if you're eligible for the Pell Grant or if you're eligible for student loans. It'll also have every answer you put in there, and it's good just to review those answers to make sure you answered them correctly and didn't mistype any of the information. As you go through college, it'll also tell you how much in Pell Grants you've received to date, also how much in student loans you've borrowed to date. And so it's just a good way to review the summary of what you've already used in federal financial aid. As you're reviewing the student aid report, if you find you did make a mistake, it's not a problem. You would just go back in and you would make a correction, and then they will reprocess it and send another copy to all the colleges as well as to our office for us to then reevaluate the corrections that you made. There is a process called verification, and so it's a random selection. And so if you submit the FAFSA, they may select you for verification. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It's just a random selection. But it requires the college then to verify that the information on the FAFSA is correct. Part of that, if you can use that IRS data retrieval, that does about almost half of the verification process. If you're not able to use that IRS data retrieval during the FAFSA process, you would then have to contact the IRS for a tax transcript transcript to be sent to the college for them to verify that the information you entered into the FAFSA was correct. But if you were select verification, you need to follow all the requests that the college financial aid office sends to you for them to complete verification, because they are not able to process 1 cent of your financial aid until you've completed verification. And so it's important, if you've been selected, that you follow all the data requests that you receive from the college so they can complete this. I would also recommend you not wait until the first day of class to do this process. And so you do want to comply in a timely manner so they have time to process any changes there might be. Also, obviously, we're living through some very unique, unusual times. And so a lot of times, even though you're reporting 2019 income, 2021 or 2020 might look a lot different in terms of your income. And so there's what's called special circumstance or professional judgment, and it allows the financial aid office to go in and make changes to your FAFSA based on your current circumstances that you can document. And so if you had a job in 2019 but you've lost it, that they can then go in and make changes to reflect what your current income is. If you went through a marital status change, if you got divorced, separated, or you become a widow, if you have a lot of unusual medical expenses, if you had a change in employment status, anything unusual, just let the financial aid office know. They'll ask for information and documentation, but then they can then make changes to your FAFSA based on your situation that may allow you to qualify for additional scholarships and grants. Okay, and so again, it might require the financial aid office to ask you some very personal information, but please share that because they do want to help you maximize your financial aid eligibility. So we have lots of outreach going on throughout the year. And so if you want additional information, we do have webinars that we're doing throughout the year. We also offer FASFA Assistance. So if you do need help completing the FAFSA, you can contact our office and schedule an appointment where we can do a computer screen share with you. We'll send you a link. You click on the link. We'll be able to see your screen, and then we can walk you through the FAFSA if you need assistance with completing the FAFSA, and we'd be happy to do that. CFWV is our website, College Foundation West Virginia, and so you can go there for all information on our state financial aid programs. We're also on social media, and you can follow that, where we provide information on financial aid throughout the year. If you go to cfwv.com and you scroll down on the homepage, you can see get a schedule of our webinar series. And so as we do different webinars, not only on the FAFSA, but also our individual state financial aid programs, we also record them as well. And so if you're not able to view it live, you can then click on virtual financial aid presentation and see the recordings of all of our presentations, whether it's we do have a FAFSA line by line, where we go line by line through the FAFSA and walk you through it, or if it's applying for Western Invests, any of those types of things, we have recorded videos on that. We also have a texting program, and so if you sign up for our texting program, that we can throughout the year send you information on financial aid and the college process in terms of ACT tests, SAT tests, get books, register for classes, as well as financial aid information that you can, again, receive those texts. If you have questions, you can text us back and we will answer those questions, not just about financial aid, but just about the college process in general. And we'd be happy to help or direct you to resources at the college level where they can help you as well. So I encourage you to sign up for the texting program. And then you have our help numbers for the federal financial aid. If you need help with your Fsa Id or the FAFSA, you can contact the federal financial aid hotline at 1-800-433-3243. Our office, 1-877-987-7664. I know there's a couple questions I know that I didn't touch on, so I will real quickly. I asked in December, Congress passed a new bill regarding Pell Grants for prisoners. And so that has been a change. So for about quarter of a century, those in prison have not been able to access the federal Pell Grant. Congress changed it. It is going to take time for them to implement it. And so it does have to be implemented by 2023. Obviously, I don't know when the U.S. Department of Education is going to be able to completely implement that, but hopefully within the next 2 years, we should see that open up. But in the meantime, there are colleges that are already approved as pilot sites. There's 65 of them throughout the country that are able to offer Pell Grants to prisoners currently. And so if you need help or have questions about that, let me know and I can get you the list of those schools. But hopefully within the next 2 years, there's going to be more colleges that are able to do that and offer Pell Grants to prisoners. And so I think I've gotten through all the questions that I was asked to. And before I turn it over to Sarah, was there anything I missed regarding the FAFSA?
I just have a couple of follow-up questions. So if people start the FAFSA and they get to a point where they're stuck and they have to stop, can they log back in and start where they left off, or do they have to start over again?
Yes, and so there is an opportunity for you to save where you're at. You can log out, and then when you log back in, you put in your demographic information or your Fsa Id username, password, and then there's a save key. There's like a 4 to 8 character save key you would just need to enter in, and it allows you to start where you left off.
Okay, great. And you mentioned the part about entering tax information, and there can be a hiccup if you were supposed to file taxes and didn't. And there are a lot of folks that don't, adults that don't know that they're supposed to file taxes. And so I think there's a little bit of fear around if they start some type of process like this and then it comes out that, oh my gosh, they were supposed to file taxes. How do they correct that to then be able to get current with filling out the FAFSA?
Well, just to allay any fears, there's no, in terms of feedback, in terms of they're not going to get reported to the IRS that, oh no, we found out you didn't file taxes, we're going to report you and now you're going to jail. That's not going to happen. But it is, if you do want to access any type of financial aid, you would then need to then report to the IRS and file the correct tax returns that you should have. And then once you do that, you verify that with the financial aid office that you did file those taxes, and then they can go on and complete the processing of your financial aid. And so you just have to correct that with the IRS. Once you do that, then the financial aid office can continue that process. But if you don't, then the financial aid office can't process any financial aid if you were supposed to file and you didn't.
Okay. And then one final question, the GI Bill or any veterans benefits, is filling out the FAFSA, does that trigger, are there questions around whether someone might be eligible or has GI Bill benefits that they can access?
So the post 9/11 GI Bill is a totally separate process, and so each college has a VA certifying official that they would need to go through, which is separate from the FAFSA. And so if they can do both. If you do qualify for post 9/11, you can utilize those funds as well as fill out the FAFSA and use both. But if you don't want to use the FAFSA, you can just use the post 9/11 GI Bill benefits. And so it is a very flexible, obviously very generous program to help our veterans. And of course, they can transfer those benefits to a dependent or spouse as well. But again, those are two separate processes, but they can both be utilized by the student.
Okay, great. This was very, very helpful and very thorough. So we can move on to Sarah to talk about West Virginia Invests.
Well, and Sarah, if you want to touch on the chat bot.
Okay, yeah. So we do have a chat bot when you go to pages like cfwv.com or you've received an award letter from us, you'll see this little bubble pop up. And our chat bot is named Sam. So if you do have any questions, you can ask Sam, and generally he can answer your questions. And if he can't answer the question, he can direct you to us, and somebody from our office will contact you to provide you with that information. All right, so I am here to talk about the West Virginia Invest Grant Program, which is one of our newest programs. Brian, can you change the slide? Great. So this is a last dollar in program that pays toward tuition and mandatory fees at participating institutions for students who are enrolled in eligible certificate and associate degree programs. So to apply, Brian, can you change that one for me?
Can I ask a question before you move on? What does last dollar in mean?
I'll actually get to that a little bit later. Okay. Do you want me to answer now or wait?
No, we will wait with anticipation.
All right. So to apply, you must complete both the West Virginia Invest Grant application at wvinvest.org and the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, which Brian just talked about at fafsa.gov. For students enrolling this coming summer of 2021, fall of 2021, and or the spring of 2022, you will need to complete the 2021-22 Invest Grant application and the 2021-22 FAFSA. Both applications opened October 1st of last fall, and as Brian mentioned, there is a priority deadline of April 15th, but applications completed after that date will be accepted. Now, if you are planning to attend this summer, you may also need to complete the 2020-21 FAFSA for other aid eligibility and should confirm that with the financial aid office at your institution. And then again, to apply, you'll go to wvinvest.org and then click apply. From there, you can also access the FAFSA. So before applying, you should know the eligibility criteria. So to be eligible, you must be a West Virginia resident for at least 12 months prior to applying. You must have a high school diploma or its equivalent. You cannot be in default on a federal student loan. You must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. You cannot have a prior degree of an associate degree or higher, or have attempted 90 or more college credit hours. You must be enrolled in an eligible major at one of the participating institutions, and you must be meeting satisfactory academic progress or SAP at your institution. And all of these eligibility criteria are listed online. Now, there is no age limit to apply. Anyone meeting the eligibility criteria may apply, whether they're currently a high school senior, currently a college student, or those considering enrolling again or for the first time. But again, you cannot have already earned an associate degree or higher or have attempted 90 or more credit hours. And even though this is a grant, there is no income limit and it is not based on financial need. So if you are eligible for an award, you will have to pay for, complete, and pass an approved drug screen during the 60 days prior to each term you are eligible for an award. You will also have to complete 2 hours of community service during every term you receive an award, and you will have to document that with your institution's financial aid office. And this program requires that you be a resident of West Virginia for 2 years after you are no longer enrolled at least half time, or the grant will convert to a loan, which must be paid back with interest and fees. Because of this requirement, you will have to sign a promissory note every year you receive an award before the funds will be sent to your institution.
And is it okay if I ask you questions along the way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, could you go back to that slide? The drug screen, I had a question about that. So, and you mentioned an approved drug screen. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I actually have a whole slide that covers a lot more on the drug screen too. So
okay.
when we get to that, if I don't cover your question, don't answer that,
okay.
Ask me then.
Then we'll hold questions to the end.
So here's the last dollar in explanation. So as a last dollar in program, it does pay toward tuition and mandatory fees. So mandatory fees are fees that are charged to all students at the institution. So there may be other fees such as program fees, course-related fees, or just other special fees that are not covered by an award. And then as a last dollar in program, certain federal grants such as the federal Pell grant, state aid, and institutional tuition waivers must first be applied to tuition and mandatory fees. Then this grant pays the remainder. So for example, if your tuition and fees was $2,000 and you got a $1,500 Pell grant, then this would be a $500 award to fill in that difference. So Susie, did I answer all your questions there? Okay. So here is the list of the 10 participating institutions. We have Blue Ridge, Bridge Valley, Eastern, Mount West, New River, Pierpont, Potomac State College, Southern, West Virginia Northern Community College, and WVU at Parkersburg. And then on our website, you can also find all of the eligible programs at each institution. So if you click Find a College, you can see a list of these institutions. If you click Find a Program, you can see each program listed by institution. Okay, so let's go over the process a little. So first you're going to apply. That's step one. Then your institution's financial aid office will review your application to determine if you're eligible. So you will have to be admitted to the institution, have completed all of the requirements with the financial aid office, and this could include that verification paperwork that Brian had mentioned earlier. And you usually have to be registered for your classes before your application can be reviewed. Then after that review occurs, you will receive an email about your eligibility. So if you are eligible for an award, the award letter sent by email will include information about completing the drug screen, the promissory note, and community service. Then after we receive passing results for the drug screen, which we will receive automatically through the approved process outlined in the award letter, then you'll receive an email to sign the promissory note. After we receive and process your signed promissory note, then we send the funds to your institution. Now, it's important to start the application process early and to complete everything with the institution early. Waiting until the last minute may not allow enough time for everything required to be processed and for you to complete everything before the term begins. So here's the details about the drug screen. So you should wait until after you receive an award letter and know that you are eligible before completing the approved drug screen process. The drug screen must be taken again during the 60 days before the term start date. And your award letter will specify the dates which you must complete this between, and it'll include a link to step-by-step instructions. So results can only be accepted for the drug screen taken during that window at an approved testing site through this approved process. And we send reminder emails with the dates during which you have to take the drug screen for subsequent terms during that award year also. So you will have to have a valid driver's license or government issued ID to go take the drug screen. It is a 10-panel test, and the cost through June 14th of 2021 is $35.70, and the cost changes annually on June 15th. We just don't know that amount yet. So this cost is paid out of pocket with a credit or debit card only, and then you can find a lot more details on the drug screen process and the policy at wvinvest.org. But Susie, if you have questions that I didn't answer here, let me know.
Yeah, I do. Just a couple. So what happens if there's a positive drug screen and certain medications that are prescribed and approved for the treatment of substance use disorder might cause a positive drug screen? So what's in place there to assist people?
Right. So we partner with Norton Medical Industries to do the processing for our drug screens for us. I am not a medical expert, so they handle that part for us. So if there is a positive result for prescribed medication, usually they reach out to the student, but the student can go ahead and reach out to them when they take the drug screen, and they will let the student know what they need provided to them so that they can account for those prescribed medications in processing the results.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yes. Okay, so once you are eligible for an award, to keep the award, again, you do have to complete the 2 hours of community service every semester. However, this has been waived for the current semester and for this upcoming summer, if you were to apply and receive a summer award. Because of the pandemic and everything going on, that requirement has been waived, but it is still going to be required, as far as we know, for fall 2021 awards and after. So again, you'll document that with the financial aid office at your institution, and that office is also available to assist you in finding acceptable community service activities. Again, you'll have to take the drug screen prior to every semester that you're eligible for an award to continue receiving it. And then to renew the award for the next award year, and our award years for this run summer through spring, you must complete the Invest Grant application and the FAFSA every year. So the applications for both of those open October 1st every year. You must continue meeting all of the eligibility criteria, including satisfactory academic progress, or SAP, at your institution. And you must also have a 2.0 cumulative GPA at the end of the spring term to renew. And then when you sign the promissory note, you are agreeing to be a West Virginia resident for 2 years after you graduate or drop below part-time enrollment. So this may include providing our office documentation. If you do not fill that obligation, if you move out of West Virginia, then you will be required to pay back the funds with interest and fees. But if you do fulfill the obligation and remain a West Virginia resident, documenting that with our office, then this will remain a grant that you do not have to repay. And then lastly, I just want to tell you, visit wvinvest.org for more information. I've covered a lot here, and everything I've covered is on our website. including the eligibility criteria, the requirements, the participating institutions and eligible programs, the application, and we do have frequently asked questions out there as well. And then, of course, if you do have questions, contact us at wvinvests@wvctcs.org, or you can call us at 304-558-4618. Yep, and that's it for me. So Susie, do you have any additional questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of follow-up questions. So back to the drug screen. So if somebody does test positive and there isn't a legitimate prescription that they can, produce and verify, what happens with that individual?
They simply do not qualify for the award for that term, but they could still be eligible for the next term and take a drug screen. If they pass it, then they would qualify for the award for that term. And we do not share that information with the schools or anybody else. That stays internal in our system.
And are there any resources offered to those individuals if they test positive?
We do. So students can log into the account that they pay for the drug screen through to see their results at any time, but we also email them with some information about resources and how to seek help.
Great. And is there any restriction in terms of time? So, for example, if somebody started school and withdrew, dropped out, interrupted their progression, as long as they don't have those 90 hours or an associate degree, they can apply for this program?
Yes. Yes, we have students who've been out of school for years who've decided to come back, and they hadn't earned the associate degree, they hadn't attempted 90 more credit hours, and they pick up and start using this grant. We also have students who have started with this grant and then had to withdraw and take a semester or two off for various reasons, and then they return and they're able to pick up using this grant again, as long as they're meeting all the eligibility criteria and the renewal at that point.
And with the West Virginia Invests, are there any restrictions for people that are either currently or formerly involved with the justice system?
No, as long as they can meet all of the requirements, take the drug screen through the approved process, complete the community service, and again, meet all the eligibility criteria.
Okay, great. That's super. Let me just double check my list here and see if we have any questions that we haven't covered. And this one might be for Brian, might be for Sarah. Either one of you feel free to answer this one. So when people get their financial aid award and maybe they only need $7,000, but their award is $10,000. Do people have to accept the whole amount, and what type of financial counseling is provided to individuals about that borrowing?
Sarah, you want to take it, or you want me to take that?
I can.
Go
So
ahead.
I would say it depends on what financial aid a student's being offered. If a student's being offered more Pell Grant than they need to cover their costs, the student needs to take all the Pell Grant. They can't really, they can, but can't really refuse the Pell Grant. But when it comes to loans, especially, that's the one where if a student is being offered more than they need, they should not and do not have to accept all that's being offered to them. They can borrow and just accept the amount that they need to cover their costs, whether that be tuition and fees, books, even a little for living expenses, whatever they need, they can reduce that. And they can always work with, especially the financial aid office that's offering it, to sit with them or call them and figure out exactly how much do I need to cover my bill to determine that specific amount. And of course, with federal student loans, before a student receives their first disbursement, they do have to complete an entrance counseling, which covers a lot of detail about federal student loans, and sign a promissory note on that as well.
Okay, great. And one of the criteria had to do with not having any previous student loans in default. Can you speak just a little bit about what does it mean to be in default, and what are the pathways out of being in default?
So a student will enter default on a student loan if they don't pay a previous student loan. Now this takes a while, so if you're in default, it shouldn't come as a surprise. You should have gotten many notices to make that payment. But students can resolve that. It starts with contacting their student loan servicer and setting up payments and making consecutive payments. And then that default can be released and students can qualify for federal student aid again and our state aid programs like the Invest grant.
And do you have any idea, and we are going to have a future segment to talk more in depth about default, but just a little bit of information about that. Do you happen to know how many months, or is there a specific amount that someone would have to pay back to get their loans out of default? So, and they don't have to completely pay the loan back in order to get out of default?
Right, I believe it's 6 consecutive payments.
Okay. Yeah, because I know, have had some individuals that I've worked with in the past that, the process for getting out of default was easier than they thought. So it was, the fear was much worse than the reality. So, in our topic of overcoming barriers, we really want to try to encourage and support people to, find out the facts, find out what they need to do to repair that and not be deterred in their educational goals.
If I can just interject real quickly on that. And so on student loan default, they just need to be careful, because I've had people where they were in default, they used what Sarah called the loan rehabilitation to get it out of default, and then they went into default again. And they can only use that loan rehabilitation once on a loan.
Oh, okay.
And so they just need to be careful that they've not used all their passes to get out of default. That they do allow them to try to easily get out of it, but once you use that, they don't let you do that again.
So it's not like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where you get to phone a friend and do a 50-50 and okay.
No.
Okay, well, this was really helpful and informational, and I think that our audience will learn a lot from this and the resources that you have to offer. Brittany, do you want to show that slide for the resources that they have to offer and their contact information?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great. And Brittany, do you have any questions or comments in closing?
I did have one question. As a foster parent and adoptive parent, what I don't want to say barriers or what differences, is there anything different from a adoptive foster child filling out their FASFA that's different from a just traditional student applying for college and FASFA and things?
Yes, it makes a huge difference.
I know we could go on for days about this, but I'm just curious what exists for that.
Right. So if a student is coming out of basically high school, when they turn 18 and they turned 18 while still in foster care, they're considered an independent student, right? But if they were adopted, then all of a sudden now they have to list their adopted parents' information. They're a dependent student. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think it's well, I'm getting a couple things mixed up. It's at any time since age 13, if they're in foster care, then they're independent. But if they've been adopted, then it becomes a dependent student. But there is the state tuition waiver. That's where I messed up. The state tuition waiver for foster care is if they had to be in foster care when they turned 18 to qualify for the state tuition waiver. So there's a lot of different moving parts there. And so obviously they can contact us if they have questions. And if I butchered anything, Sarah can correct me.
No, that all sounds right.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's super helpful just to add that, you all have the resources to just reach out, because I know every situation is unique. So I appreciate that.
Great. Well, thank you all again for your time and your expertise. And we really appreciate you being with us, and everybody stay safe with COVID still being an issue for everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.